Hello and welcome back. It's Monday, so that must mean that it is a cultural discussion for couch therapy. And today, I'm going to talk about control. And you don't want it. So I'll start this little discussion today with an anecdote of a teacher that was at one of the schools that I used to work at, as sort of the example of Japanese culture's approach to this kind of thing. She was a wonderful teacher, spoke fantastic English, worked really hard in all of her classes, and sort of embodied that spirit in Japan of self-sacrifice, working really, really hard, and taking on more and more and more responsibility to help the group around her. But I definitely noticed during the year that I worked with her, that I thought that it got to an excessive point where her life was, you might say, no longer her own. She was doing so much extra work. She was relied on for so many different things that it, to my mind, it was like, don't you control any aspect of your life? Don't you want to do things for yourself personally? You know, how are you to follow your star, whatever it is you want to describe it as? And on one day, only to give her a shoulder to lean on, I asked her how she was doing. I said, you know, you look really busy this week. How are you handling all of this? And she did take that moment to sit back kind of tired in her chair, and she said, oh man, Dave, it's been crazy, and I really do feel like I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off sometimes. And kind of echoing what I thought, she didn't really feel like her life was much of hers anymore. But then she kind of laughed when she said that and looked at me and said, you know, but I don't know if this were to change, if I would be comfortable with that. And she didn't go on to say anything more about it, but then I kind of took from that, so you do, you like this way of living. And at the time, I had to digest it. I didn't really understand, what does that mean? I was like, how, is kind of a slave to your job, have you found so much peace with this? But then I got to thinking afterwards, as I do, how we all have at points in our lives thought to ourselves, facing some sort of, whether it's truly difficult or not, we think of it as facing a difficult decision, and we think to ourselves, if only some force in the universe would tell me what it is that I should do, would illuminate for me the right path that I should take, so I would no longer have to worry about what it is that I'm to do next. And the strangest thing about this is that I think beyond the morality of a child, we realize when we get older is that these choices that we're fretting over, that we're waffling, we can't decide on what would be the right thing to do, is that we're totally aware of the fact that there is no perfectly right answer. We know that if we go down this one, we're going to have a variety of things happen. We go down this choice, the exact same thing. What more is troublesome to our mind is the fact that we have to control it, and we feel a great burden through that sort of experience where we are responsible then for that action, and we sort of we cry out to whatever other force, because it would take the burden of control from us. It would control, another word may be responsibility, from us, and we could relax knowing that that wasn't on our shoulders. I think you can find this confirmed as well in any number of studies that you look at, where when people are given a multitude of choices, they're actually more depressed by having a wide variety of choices compared to where they have a limited selection. We feel better naturally when we have fewer things to decide from. All this deciding is actually what does all this mental wear and tear on us and burns us down. So it's not limited to these sort of like forks in the road for our lives. This is innate to nearly every other aspect of our life when we have to make decisions regarding a choice. Having ultimate control, having unlimited selection, having unlimited responsibility to choose is something that has the habit of wearing on us. What I would go into next then is a discussion of how this relates to culture. Now, culture in one way is the sort of built-up traditions that your group of people have always done, wherever it is that you're from. So there's no, it's indefensible to say that there's sort of like characteristics that are interesting and artistic and are more than what I'll discuss next. But I think you would also say that culture is also a guideline. Culture is also a form of control. And you will find in the Japanese culture that it's very, very, very strong. And so in another way, control is very, very, very strong in the Japanese culture. But then in turn, like I've already discussed, because the control is put onto you, people are more at peace because they know what it is and how they're to behave. Culture is basically a set of instructions that when you do come to that fork in the road that I've already discussed, it can tell you what to do. If you think, oh, if only I had some guiding force, some power that be, that would let me know what I should do in my life, culture can be that answer for some people, and I see that a lot in Japan. So when this woman may have been trying to decide, this teacher that I mentioned before, when she's trying to decide how should I behave in this situation, if I knew whether I should stand up for myself and live my own life, or should I be self-sacrificing, her culture told her what to do, and the decision was taken from her, as was the burden of that choice. Culture is kind of an escape hatch for decision making, as much as it's all these interesting little traditions that we do as well. So it can be a sort of mental release from the responsibility of control. And I think you'll also see as well, it's no great surprise then when you come across people who are more individualistic, that usually, no matter what culture they're a part of, they stand somewhat at odds from it, because these kind of people who are more comfortable being individualistic don't so much rely on the culture to create their choices, and so as a result stand somewhat outside of it and end up being some of the most interesting people that you come across. If you can carry the weight of responsibility on your shoulders for all your choices, you're a very, very strong person. Now I come around to kind of some closing points in this video, which I think is kind of cool. This is a sort of paradox, and this is where I've been taught most, what I've been taught most in the Japanese culture. You take a sort of, we'll take sort of a Buddhist idea that desire, if you desire something, you immediately are put in that thing's power, because your happiness then becomes dependent on you possessing that thing. The happiest people in the world desire nothing. And in that way, they go through life, and somebody says, well, don't you want a master's degree? And they would say, no, I don't need that at all. And I don't need your approval if you don't like it. They're really, really happy. And then they say, well, don't you want those shoes? And they say, no, I don't want those shoes at all. People who don't want anything are really, really, really happy. They're content. And in just the same way, people who desire control, which I think is all of us to some degree, as we're trying to understand it, immediately are put in control's power. Because we want control, we don't have it. And that's why I say that it's sort of a paradox. Let's use, for example, a relationship. When you're having an argument, that classic age-old chestnut, when you're having an argument with someone, when usually do you gain control of the conversation again? Is it when you've laid waste to your opponent and after hours of bitter argument, you finally ripped them round to your way of thinking and beat the truth into them, the stupid fool? No, it's not usually that. I think you're already thinking of the answer in your head now. Usually you gain control again in a conversation, in an argument, when you give it up. When you finally say, I'm sorry, and I don't need to have control of this anymore, and strangely enough, it returns to you because you're no longer trying to control that person or the perspective that they're having. They don't so much push back against you, and so by letting go, you gain it again. Because you don't need to win, because you've divested yourself of the interest of being right, you become right. You are now the winner because you gave up. And this ultimately is what I've learned from the Japanese culture. What looks like, from an observer's standpoint, somebody giving up control, somebody like the sensei that I mentioned earlier in the video, somebody who looks like they've given over their lives to other people, in just the same way that you've taken control back of an argument by no longer needing it, by no longer desiring it, by caring far, far less about the control that you have of your personal life, you gain it back again. By not having to say, it needs to be this way, I need it to be this way, I need to do this, A, B, C, and D before it is that I'm happy, you gain happiness. And I don't think it's surprising at all that when you're asked to do these things for other people, when you start to live for other people, that kind of inadvertently you get a great deal of fulfillment from this because you're helping other people. And when you help other people, it's not entirely altruistic. You feel good about that investment in others. I don't know that I could entirely give it up in the way. I don't think I could go full monk. Of course, there are things that I desire, but I've definitely, through living in the Japanese culture, through observing this kind of behavior, come to the realization that a constant burning desire to make sure things exactly follow your will have the exact opposite result that it is that you're searching for. And so if you loosen up, if you are a little more selfless, if you desire less to have control, you'll get a truckload of it back in return. Very, very interesting. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this kind of discussion of things. If you made it this far, this is kind of cool. There's no excitement, I think, we know in life without the potential of loss, right? So I was kind of rolling around in my mind. I was like, do I tell people this on the channel? I was like, no, you should, because it'll be that potential for loss that makes this far, far more exciting. So I'm interested to continue to evolve in Japan, just like I would with my channel, which I have with my channel, just like I would with any passion project that I work on. And my job is very much a part of that, as much as I love it that I'm afforded the time to work on things like this. And so I want to become a better teacher, and I want to become basically a more involved member of the Japanese society at higher levels. And the way that I have access to doing that, beyond the language, which I'm always working on, is education. And I don't know if anybody's ever read this book before. It's called The Alchemist. And one of the things that I really loved in the book was this section of it that it was talking about, it's like an allegory, and it's talking about the idea that you need to pay attention to the omens. Put really, really simply, if you sort of sift through all the mystery of what exactly this is saying, what I took it to mean in the book was you need to pay attention to opportunities. And everybody, given a certain social strata in life, will receive a number of opportunities. I'm no different. And the big difference between people who are, in quotes, successful and those who aren't are simply the people who took the opportunities when they presented themselves and were aware when they presented themselves. Half of an opportunity is recognizing it as one. And in my time on YouTube, a short while ago, I came across a wonderful guy, Letters from Japan. Check out his channel. It's amazing quality stuff, very cerebral, beautiful footage. He's a master's degree here in Japan. He's a professor. And we talked a little bit because we knew each other through YouTube, and we were talking about master's degrees, and I said, that's really interesting, but I could never do that because my GPA is just not quite there. And he said to me, what are you talking about? You know, it's not so much about your GPA, it's about you making a great application and finding a good program that works for you. And that sort of sat in my mind as an omen. I was like, okay, well, maybe I should pay attention to that. And then not a short while ago, I went to Kyoto, which I made the last video on, and there I met a friend of my friend Drew's, and we started talking, and I said, you know, what do you do? And the first thing he said was, well, I'm a professor here. I've got my master's degree. And I said, oh, that's amazing. And he said, what do you do? And I said, I teach. And he said, you need to get your master's degree. And again, I said, I just don't know if my GPA is high enough. And he said, that's ridiculous. It's not about your GPA. It can be a bit lower. Do the application. So, over the course of this last week, where I felt like I was slapped repeatedly by the universe telling me this is an omen, this is an opportunity. If you want it, take it. I've completed filling out my application for a master's degree, and I will be submitting that tomorrow, and I don't know exactly when I'll hear back, but that's the excitement for the channel. Will I fail? Woohoo! But I am applying to do my master's degree while I work in Japan, because I would love to teach at a university, or long term, you don't set little dreams, right? You set big ones. I would love to become involved in some sort of diplomatic respect within Japan. I can't do it in Canada because they need you to speak French, but I'm starting to speak Japanese, and if I could get it high enough, and I believe if I had the master's degree, I could one day, when the world is becoming so interconnected, I could have a real impact in, I think, the Japanese government in some role as a kind of diplomat, maybe not official, but that basically I would create some sort of liaison between Japan and other countries, and to do so, I would do that through having a master's degree. Maybe even teach at university first to develop that kind of reputation, develop my resume further, that I could then work at that other level. But that's the interest that I have, and it's exciting because I can fail miserably and repeatedly. But the glory is all the more if I do succeed, and I will keep the channel notified of my failures and my successes, so we can cheer along. You can, on the bitter side of things, cheer if I fail. I know there's a few of you out there. Or cheer when I succeed as well. But I'm really excited for it because I love pursuing these challenges, and that'll be awesome. All right, thanks for listening to sort of this long-winded rant at the end of the video. I wanted to do it at the end for the people who sort of sit to the very end, so you discover this kind of cool thing about what'll happen on the channel. Please do like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy videos like this. I'll be talking about updates I'll be doing to my Patreon because I am a photographer. I'm going to be including that in my Patreon soon for people who would like to get some beautiful prints of Japan. As a part of the awards system in Patreon, I'm going to make prints, some of the photo prints that I do a part of that. So if you want to check that out on Patreon, that'll be going up in the next week or so. Drop by there anyways if you want to check out the other stuff that I'm doing. There's my book as well. I'll put up there, available on Amazon if you're down with the sort of drama horror. It's a good read, I assure you. And thank you again and again and again. I appreciate so much everybody checking out these videos. It's a real privilege, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.